You have accessed the podcast of OA, located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will. The podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lanterns Myron Rumsey and Bill Giancoli, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome back to the podcast of OA. This is episode 112. I'm Bill Giancoli, and I'm joined by the creator and guardian of the blog of OA, Myron Rumsey. How are you, Myron?
I am doing really great tonight, Bill, and thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the podcast of OA. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, issues 12 through 15. So we're going to cover the end of Bottled Light and the little one-off story they did, and the first two parts of the Quest for Hope storyline where Hal and Kyle go off in search of Saint Walker. And then we're also going to pay a visit to the planet of the Apes and talk about the new crossover from Boomco Studios. So we got a whole lot of Green Lantern to talk about. We're glad you're here to join us, and we're going to kick into high gear momentarily. So, Bill, what do you say we start jumping right in and talk about some comics?
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Myron, we're at the end of Bottled Light with issue 12, where we're going to see everything's coming to a head with Larfleeze, the Green Lanterns, and the Yellow Lanterns kind of working together here. Start of a beautiful relationship, if you will. So, Myron, what did you think of this conclusion of Bottled Light?
You know, I thought it was kind of predictable, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun. You know, you commented in the last episode of the podcast where you're kind of an action movie junkie, and to me, this whole finale screamed action movie from one cover to the other. I don't know what you thought about that, but there's just one moment after the other. You know, beautiful Ethan Van Sciver artwork. So everything just kind of leapt off the page. Great fighting sequences as they start breaking the bottles and monsters come out, and it's getting harder and harder for Larfleeze and Brainiac to kind of keep control of things. And then there's a really beautiful full-page spread of John and Hal and Kyle and Guy, and it was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and there were things about it that I don't know. It was interesting when he destroyed Brainiac and Brainiac becomes an Orange Lantern construct, and you see Tomar 2 really rising to the challenge of trying to keep the bottled city of Zudar, the whole planet, trying to keep that city in the bottle after the bottle was loose, and him struggling with his willpower to do it. And then at the end, there was just a great moment where Hal talks to Tomar 2 about his father, because Tomar 2 is questioning whether or not he should continue to be in the Lantern Corps, and the things that he's risking and the things that he could lose if something bad happens to him. And it was great because you saw, Robert Venditti took a little bit of a moment there for Hal to talk about his mother and how he didn't get the closure that he wished he'd had, and it's something he's regretted his entire life since then. And he really counsels Tomar 2 in a very uncharacteristically mature moment for Hal. Hal's kind of that guy. He's the Indiana Jones. He runs in. You don't really get into his skin too often, but here's a case where you really got to see what was going on with him. And then you see, John Stewart and Soren Natu deciding, hey, we're going to put behind our differences and move forward together. Again, predictable as all get out, but it's still fun to read. What did you think about it?
No, exactly like what you said. I'm an action junkie, so I enjoyed that aspect to it. But it was like a good helping of mashed potatoes and gravy. You know what you're getting with it, but it's delicious every time. And it's heartwarming, or heartburning. I don't know. And
it makes you want to sleep when you're done.
It makes you want to sleep when you're done because you're satisfied, and you get a little bit of all of that in this, and I think it's just great that they're doing what we've kind of always wanted to see, of like where we're starting to see some of these other characters kind of getting a background, which we're going to see in this one-off coming up. We're starting to see backstory on Tomar 2. Did I get that? Tomar 2. Sorry, keep getting those all mixed up. The other one's dead. The one's dead, one's alive, right?
Right.
we're getting a little more backstory on Tarmar 2 and what's going on in his life, and now that bleeds into the 13th episode, and I think that's overall why we like this series so much. You're getting Hal Jordan, you're getting the ones that, the classic Green Lanterns, and you're starting to learn more about what's going on with these other side characters, which could maybe lead to other books coming out later on.
Yeah, I think this series is ripe for spin-off. I think if any book is going to cause a spin-off, it's going to be this one, because Venditti's done a really good job of balancing the cast out, but the challenge is giving them all their due diligence. And one of the comments I've heard from people, and I've noticed it myself, is he's doing a really good job of focusing on John and Kyle and Hal and Guy, and then he'll take like one ancillary character, and give them a few moments here and there. A couple issues back it was Rotlot Fan. This time around it's Tomar 2, but they don't get a lot of time, but they each kind of get their own little moment, and that's nice. It's good, but I think it's hard for him to really go in depth. You can't go deep on any of this stuff because you've got such a big cast, but he's doing a really admirable job of balancing them out.
But I think he does a great job. That's where the action comes in. This is a fast-paced ride.
Yeah, exactly. And there's still little moments of characterization in there.
It's enough to go, okay, you're keeping me pleased with a lot of eye candy with Ethan Van Sciver's work and the action that's being on the page, but then you're kind of like, okay, I'm following the story. And it also helps. There are a lot of familiar characters. So in all fairness to maybe the other Green Lanterns book, the book that shall not be named, the Green Lanterns book, there are two new characters, so we have to warm up to them maybe, but this is all familiar characters, so we can get away with, like a snippet here or a snippet there.
Yeah, I agree. And then you mentioned the issue number 13, the plot, the heroes one-off issue. I thought that was really kind of cool because you got to see the impact of the Green Lanterns on people from their perspective. So it took it and spun it. And some people I know didn't like the issue because they thought it was, it spent too much time doing that stuff. But I thought it was a nice way to bridge the two arcs. And it told a really kind of a neat little story. I liked it. And I don't know. For me, it talked about why I love the Green Lantern mythology. There are moments when the Zudarian character, who's a little girl during Bottled Light, is now in her aging days. She's in her golden years, and she's become a Green Lantern herself. She succeeds Tomar 2 when he passes on. But she talks about the power of will and how it inspires people and it illuminates the darkness. I thought, it really captured the essence of the Green Lantern mythology in a way that's relatable to everybody. Everybody can approach this book and get something different out of it because it doesn't speak to just one thing. And so I thought that was really powerful. And one thing I do got to comment on is the art in this issue, because it wasn't Ethan Van Sciver or Rafa Sandoval. It was V. Ken Marion, who you and I know because he lives about an hour from where we live. I liked it because it told a personal story and it told a little bit about the Green Lanterns. But then Robert Venditti did do something, and we haven't talked about this part of it. He does a little bit of the old Jeff Johns vision thing, where we see visions of the future and different things that he's talking about. And we see Evil Star, kind of a revamped version of Evil Star, and some new threats and some really giant guys that I thought were really, really, really cool. And then there's this 2-page spread that shows a whole core of Volthoom rings flying into space, and then it shows another Battle of Light, essentially. But really some exciting imagery that gives us an idea of some of the things that Robert Venditti has planned down the road. And I think it was kind of a neat thing for Venditti to do, because he really hasn't done this before, this kind of foreshadowing, but he's a long-form story writer. And one of the things that is really different about the Rebirth era than New 52 is he's kind of, he's been given the keys to the kingdom, and he doesn't have to necessarily write to editorial demands. I'm being nebulous on purpose, but I think I think there are things that he wanted to do during his run during New 52 that he had set a course in motion, and I was like, oh well, you can't use that character, or you can't use this character, and so he wasn't necessarily allowed to do things he planned on doing, and I've probably said more than I should say there, but I think that he's been given the carte blanche to do what he wants to do, and in this foreshadowing, we're seeing how he's got some things in mind that are really kind of interesting. Some old stuff being revisited and some new threats, which to me is exciting because it's easy to fall on, when you have a mythology of this age, it's easy to fall on just recycling things over and over again. But here we've got some really some cool things. I mean, these giant beings that they show walking around are just really, I don't know, they really captivate my imagination, so I can't wait to see the kinds of stories he's got in store for us. If anything, that's what got me excited about this issue. It was a nice story, but at the same time, I was really excited for what it said is about to happen more than anything else. But anyway, when that issue's over with, we jump back into a couple of issues where Hal and Kyle go in search of Saint Walker, fan favorite Saint Walker. So the Blue Lanterns are on their way back, and I loved how you probably, Bill, do you know who the Space Cabbie is?
Not really. I mean, he seemed like a new character to me.
He's not new, but he's not very often used. So it was really, to me, I was geeking out because I was like, oh, the Space Cabbie, and it was really. They just used this character on Justice League Action not too long ago, so I was like, oh wow, this is like Space Cabbie rebirth here, Yeah. But it was really cool to see Guy Gardner interact with Space Cabbie, and Venditti wrote it as though they have a history. They've never appeared together before, but it was a very natural interaction. He made you feel like they definitely had a history. But I wanted to ask you what you thought about the whole thing of John trying to get the two sides to come together, and first Hal and Kyle ditch him, and then Guy disappears on him. And I just wondered what you thought about that, because I thought it was funny, but at the same time it makes it hard for John to lead when his fellow Earth Lanterns aren't marching to the same beat he's expecting everybody else to march to.
And, I don't know. I kind of liked it because, again, that builds drama amongst the characters. And I think that's what we ultimately like is, like, how do these four characters get along? And, it's almost like the humans have taken over as the guardians of the Green Lantern Corps. They are the core of them.
Well, they're almost the majority of them.
Yeah, I know, really, at this point, too. But, yeah, really. Now that I keep forgetting about the other two, but but you think about these four in particular. I liked it. I liked the way John was kind of like, okay, this is what I have to deal with, but it seems right. Like John's in his element, being that commander. But it's almost kind of like a Batman in a way. Batman tries to bark orders too, but Superman's like, ultimately I'm going to do what I need to do.
Yeah. I think
there's a little equality there. That
yeah.
It's not rank and file anymore.
No, and I think John's finding that when the chips are down, people look to him because he's a natural commander in a combat situation. But now he's finding that it's more difficult to lead when people aren't in crisis than it is to lead when people are in crisis. Because when people are in crisis, they're looking for a leader. But now that they're not in crisis necessarily, they're not looking for a leader. And now you've got somebody saying, hey, we're going to break up all the sector partnerships, and you're going to partner with a Yellow Lantern.
Yeah, and they're thrill junkies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they're going, and Kyle's just, and I'm sort of not to. She says, like, if they, Guy and Hal, they're going off into their own adventures, and Kyle's just, following his big brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Kyle's, not a thrill junkie, but, it's where Hal and Guy are going. He's getting dragged into something.
Yeah.
And that was a perfect description of all of them. I think that was a cool line there.
I thought it was to talk about the art again. I honestly think that this series has one of the best art teams out there, period. And between Ethan Van Sciver and Rafa Sandoval, this issue 14, when Hal and Kyle encounter these giant creatures and you see how small they look compared to these guys and the level of detail and depth on these creatures, it was just, I don't know. I was so excited when I saw the artwork and how well it looked and how monstrous it looked. It really gave you an idea of the grand scale and proportion of some of these threats that we see. I mean, Relic was big too, but I don't know, just seeing them fly around the corner and these two giant creatures, and they look so incredibly terrifying. I just was like, this is the science fiction adventure action stuff I've been wanting to read for a long time. So I was loving every minute of this whole thing. Now, some people commented about Kyle. Did you think that Kyle was out of character in the first part of the story?
How so?
He was kind of making jokes and not listening to Hal and doing his own thing, and I'm doing all the work, and I don't know, the chemistry wasn't there. And I keep thinking back to Omega Men, and that Kyle went through a whole lot of crap then, and is he suffering from PTSD? Was the first thing I was thinking about, and then the second thing I was thinking about is there's a how shall I say this?
He stole his woman.
There's a violet elephant in the room. There's the whole Carol Ferris thing, and they kind of made their peace. But is there some underlying tension between Hal and Kyle over Carol? And who knows? She has not been mentioned, but maybe that's part of the reason why they're both kind of acting that way.
Is Kyle all on board with what happened with Hal? Like he took off and went rogue and everything? Does he knows that whole backstory now?
Not really, but I don't think he knows any of the story. I don't think he knows about the rogue stuff at all because he was presumed dead and has been in the Omega Men universe doing stuff with the Omega Men. I don't know how much he actually knows.
I guess I didn't pick up on it, but I wasn't looking for it either. Okay, well,
I wondered if you did because you don't have the same history with the characters, and so you have a different perspective than I do. And
I mean, they seem, the general snarky remarks that sometimes they usually have.
Now, issue 15, I loved seeing Guy Gardner without the ring, wearing his Guy Gardner jacket and his Warriors t-shirt. And again, for longtime readers, that's all throwback to the 90s and Guy Gardner when he had his own book and he had Sinestro's ring back then and so on. To me, I was just geeking out over those moments. That to me was just awesome to see.
Yeah, see, I wasn't familiar with any of that, so I am just more like, okay, I just don't get the point of why is he taking on Arkillo without his ring. What is he hoping to prove? Is he trying to get Arkillo to join with the Green Lanterns?
I'm not sure. Or is he seriously? Yeah, I don't know.
I'm really. And it's kind of, remember, it's funny when we talked to Ethan Van Sciver, one of the things Ethan Van Sciver said that he wasn't a big fan of what they would do with Hal is Hal always giving up the ring. Right. And then, this is almost the opinion. Now, not that Ethan was, writing this, but he, that's kind of the thing. I'm in the same mode is like, okay, why is he giving up the ring? And what does that prove to anything? I don't think Arkillo is like sitting there. I really respect you for giving up the weapon that you would need for me to beat you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And did we run into this with David Gallagher, where we were a little upset that he was able to have, without a ring, and be arm wrestling Hercules?
Yeah, during conversions. That was awful.
Yes. So I'm a little like, I don't know what the angle is. Maybe there is some reason there. I just don't know what it is now. So I was a little bothered by the whole not having a ring thing.
Yeah. Now, the Misery Mound, Ethan Van Sciver made the Misery Mound look absolutely terrifying. And some of the panels, again, it's Ethan Van Sciver. Some of these panels are just eye candy, and there's really,
the explosion.
Oh yeah,
Oh. I mean, it looks. No, I don't think we've ever doubted Ethan Van Sciver's artwork. I mean, he's awesome.
I thought there was
I like the little squirrel around. Sandwalker.
Yeah, I can't
Any
remember.
significance there yet, or do you know, or is there something?
He had that creature before, and the name escapes me, but I thought it was new at first, and then somebody reminded me. I was reading somebody's comments on Facebook. They mentioned the character's name, that he'd had this little creature before, so it's not new. But one of the things I liked about this in particular was the moments where the Misery Mound have taken over Hal and Kyle, and we're seeing inside their heads. And it's a nice ode to Green Lantern number 20, where you see Hal, what he wants, and it's him being a husband and a dad and a grandfather, which is an ode back to him and Carol from Green Lantern 20. And then you see Kyle, Space Jesus, doing what he wants to do, spreading his light throughout the universe. I thought that was really neat that we kept that continuity. And those are the things I was talking about when I was talking about continuity in the last episode, is paying reverence to the things that we know exist in the universe, and at least you're not beholden to them, but you're making them seem organic and real in a very natural way.
No, and Venditti we've commented multiple times. He's been very true to even the characters, the way they're written, and I think we saw that with Sinestro, and we're seeing this with all the characters. I think John fits his role perfectly. I think they all do.
Yeah, I think he's really gotten the voice of the characters down really, really well.
Very much so.
So anyway, let's take a short break and come back and talk about Planet of the Apes.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Myron, we had another crossovers. Now, we had the crossover of Star Trek, which we're going to be talking about probably in another episode where we're going to do the interview. But we also had a crossover with the Planet of the Apes. So, let me know what you think of that kind of crossover. You are not a dirty animal.
when this was announced, it was one of those I did a double take. I'm like, really? But then, I was thinking, well, this could work. It could work. It's a, future timeline. Maybe we think about it as an alternate universe future timeline. And it's an interesting story, but I think it's a little too familiar for people who've been reading the Green Lanterns book. The gist of the story so far, and we're only one issue in, but the gist of the story so far is that there is a ring that Sinestro knows about that, of course, nobody else knows about. It's another secret ring the Guardians never told us about, and it's very much like the Phantom Lantern ring in that it can channel any emotion. So I think it's unfortunate for the publishers, and this is Boom Studios. Justin Jordan, who is a familiar name to Green Lantern fans. He wrote the Green Lantern New Guardians series. He's the writer of the story. It's a story by a guy named Robbie Thompson. And it's unfortunate that they didn't know, or that nobody from DC told them about the Phantom Lantern story, because the timing of this makes it look like they're, pardon the pun, they're aping the story from Green Lanterns. And that's unfortunate, because it could be an interesting story if we didn't already just read a similar story. That being said, it's interesting to see how they've fleshed out the Planet of the Apes universe. And if you're familiar with the Planet of the Apes movies, this takes place after the first movie, the original movie. And it's interesting, but where it suffers with problems, it's not so much the writing. I mean, you have to kind of forgive the fact that the story's similar to what you've already read, because this could go in a very different direction. Obviously, they didn't compare notes. They just had very similar ideas. But this new ring, the Universal Ring is the way that they've called it, lands on the Planet of the Apes, and it draws Hal and Sinestro into the Planet of the Apes timeline. But there's some things visually, the visuals really bothered me more so than the story. I'm trying to forgive the story and read it for its own thing. But the artist, and it's Barnaby Bagenda, who if you read Omega Men, you're very familiar with his work because he did the artwork on Omega Men. He does some nice work with the Apes characters, but his Green Lantern characters, not so much. There's a panel where Dexter is attacking Aricia, as an example, and Dexter does not look like a cat. He looks like a feline midget. he doesn't have cat anatomy, if that's the right way to look at it. But the Green Lanterns look kind of flat. They lack detail and definition. And then coloring wise, and I realize this isn't Bagenda's issue, this is the colorist, but all the Green Lanterns have white boots, which is one of my biggest pet peeves, and it's white boots throughout the entire issue. So I was taken out from that. And then there's like even a panel where Aricia looks like she's got black tights on. So there's visually some things that really made it hard for me to enjoy the issue. Things like, Sinestro and Hal are fighting, and you expect, a fight between Hal and Sinestro to have some pretty spectacular visuals, and it looks like they're fighting each other with a grate. Like, they've each got this grid of metal with pointy sticks on it, shooting at each other, and it doesn't look like anything. It just, I don't know, it just looks awful when it comes to that stuff. So, visually, nice on the Ape side, lousy on the Green Lantern side, and then when you look at the fact that the plot appears to be, I don't want to say regurgitated, but it sounds like regurgitated. It just sounds like a recycled plot, and I realize that's not the fault of the writer, but it just, if you're interested in it, buy it. But if you want to wait and pick up the trade, I think you're better off waiting to see how this thing turns out, because it could end up being really, really good, or it could end up really being a stinker. And I'm disappointed a little bit because the covers for these issues are spectacular. The first issue had an Ethan Van Sciver cover, but then they've done different themes. So one variant has a variation on a movie poster from the Planet of the Apes movies. One cover is a riff on a classic Green Lantern cover. One cover looks like Amigo action figure from the 70s of a Planet of the Apes character done as one of the lanterns in one of the various colors of the spectrum. So there's really great covers. The artwork on the covers are great, but the artwork on the inside, not so hot. So I'm hoping it gets better. But, it's enjoyable. If you're a Planet of the Apes junkie, you're definitely going to want to pick it up. But like I said, you could probably skip it and not miss anything. And you can certainly check out the reviews that you're going to see online and make decisions for yourself. And maybe the art won't bother you as much as it does me. I get a stickler for certain things, and one of them is white boots. And there was just white boots throughout the whole issue, and it just bugged the heck right out of me, to be honest. But
the apes ruling the planet was okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That part's okay. That part was okay. I'm a little tired of the Guardians have a secret history that you don't know about, and they're keeping secrets on you, and that part's just gotten a little redundant for me. I'm kind of
they're shifty little guys.
Yeah, I miss the Guardians that were altruistic and had good intentions, but their lack of emotion and lack of ability to connect with people made them standoffish. I miss those Guardians, and we don't have those Guardians anymore. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on Planet of the Apes crossing over with Green Lantern.
Hey, Green Lantern fans, I'm Bill Giancoli.
And I'm Myron Rumsey. We are the co-hosts of the podcast of OA.
If you want to hear all updates and news about the Green Lantern Corps, tune in to the podcast of OA.
Hey, you can find us at www.blogofoa.com. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and Stitcher.
This wraps up episode 112. So we've had a good run with Hal Jordan's and the Green Lantern Corps. Continues to be a great Green Lantern story that Venditti is really putting together. We are really enjoying it. And the Planet of the Apes crossover that maybe just didn't go over as well as you want. And we just don't like apes in white boots.
It wasn't very appealing.
Oh, that's bananas. Alrighty. So before it gets out of control, and I assure you it will beyond recording, thank you all for listening to our podcast, and continue to listen. Please write in feedback is always welcomed, and it's how we get better.
That's right. So, till next time, keep your power ring charged, treat each other great, and make every day your brightest day. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. And Skype users can leave a voicemail on the show's account, Blog of OA. Emails can be sent to greenlantern@stny.rr.com. And you can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Facebook and Google+. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.